Imagine for a moment you are standing on the edge of an endless white silence. The wind carries small snow crystals. They sparkle in the air like stardust. Beneath your feet is ice, several kilometers thick. And even deeper, there where neither sunlight nor human gaze can penetrate, sleeps something that has seen a different world. A world where this ice never existed. A world of warm rain, the sound of leaves and rivers carrying their waters to the ancient seas, and perhaps a world that holds secrets we can only guess at. Greetings, my dear listeners, and I invite you to write in the comments what city you're from and what time it is. Let's feel all of us spread across different corners of the planet. Together immerse ourselves in this amazing story about the most mysterious continent on Earth, Antarctica. The word itself sounds like a spell of cold, like a whisper of eternal ice. The sixth continent, the last frontier of the unknown on our planet. A place where no ancient man has ever set foot. At least, no trace of his presence has survived. But what if I told you that beneath this lifeless shell of ice, there could be something that would completely change the way we think about the past? That there, trapped in the ice, might be the slumbering outlines of a whole world that was very different. Let's let go of our imagination for a moment and let it slide back in time. Not hundreds of years, not thousands, but millions. Imagine the Earth 90 million years ago. The planet was about 14 degrees warmer then than it is today. 14 degrees is the difference between a winter day and a summer evening. The difference between the northern tundra and the Mediterranean coast. And there, at the very edge of the world, where permafrost now reigns, were lush, temperate rainforests. Close your eyes and try to see it. Tall ferns whose leaves rustle in the warm breeze. Coniferous trees with their crowns reaching into the misty sky. Rivers, full and slow, winding between the hills, carrying a suspension of reddish clay to the shores of an ancient ocean. The air is humid, full of the odors of flowering plants and fresh leaves. Somewhere in the distance, you can hear the cries of unknown creatures, those we now know only from fossils and museum reconstructions. Dinosaurs still rule this world. They roam between the trees, leaving deep footprints in the soft soil. And the rivers are filled with strange fish, the ancestors of the fish that live in the oceans today. It was Antarctica, not dead, not frozen, but alive, breathing, full of movement and sounds. A continent that did not yet know that it was waiting for a long sleep under a blanket of ice, millions of years long. But time is a patient sculptor. It works slowly, almost imperceptibly to those who live in the moment. But its creations are grandiose. Continents slide across the surface of the Earth's mantle like ice flows on a spring river. Very slowly, millimeter by millimeter, year by year, but inexorably. The land we now call Antarctica was once part of the giant supercontinent of Gondwana. Imagine, 700 million years ago, the disparate southern continents were replaced by one huge landmass. Africa, South America, Australia, India, and Antarctica were all one, linked by mountain ranges and shared rivers. In those unimaginably distant times, mountains rose in the territory of the future Antarctica. Tall, young, sharp-toothed, like the Alps today. Their formation was part of a grand process, the collision and compression of the Earth's crust at the birth of Gondwana. These mountains, which we now call the Gamburtsev Mountains, witnessed the birth of the continent. And they are still there. They still are. Buried under kilometers of ice, hidden from human view, they continue to exist in eternal darkness and cold. They were first discovered in 1958. A Soviet expedition working in Antarctica used seismological instruments. They sent sound waves deep into the earth and listened to the echoes reflected from the hidden structures. And the echoes brought incredible news. Hidden under the ice was a mountain range comparable in size to the Alps. Mountains without peaks visible to the human eye. Mountains that cast no shadows on the snow. Ghost mountains that exist in an icy parallel world. What's amazing is that these ancient mountains have survived in almost pristine condition. Usually, mountain ranges are worn down by wind and water over hundreds of millions of years, destroyed by frost and the movement of glaciers. But the Gamburtsevs have not undergone such destruction. It's as if they've been preserved. The ice sheet that covered them became a preserver rather than a destroyer. The ice in this part of Antarctica is very cold, and it moves slowly, so slowly that it shifts less than 5 meters in a year. This phenomenon is called a cold-based ice sheet. The ice is so cold that it doesn't melt even under its own weight. It doesn't slide. It doesn't flow in violent torrents as it does elsewhere. It just lies and preserves. Scientists studying these mountains with radar and other instruments say that under the ice, you can see not only the mountain peaks themselves, but also the valleys between them and the beds of ancient rivers that once flowed down the slopes. You can see the shape of a landscape that existed tens of millions of years ago. It's like looking at a photograph of a world that disappeared long ago, but by some miracle has survived, encased in the icy amber of time. And recently, quite recently, by geological standards, another discovery was made in East Antarctica, in the area called Wilkes Land, under a layer of ice more than 1.5 kilometers thick. An ancient landscape was discovered, huge, the size of a whole country, the size of Belgium, more than 31,000 square kilometers of hidden land. And this landscape, as it turned out, was not formed by glaciers. It was created by rivers. Try to imagine this picture. Millions of years ago, when there was no ice sheet on the place of modern Antarctica, full-flowing rivers flowed across this land. They carved valleys in the soft rocks, formed bends, and created a system of waterways leading to the sea. Along the banks of these rivers grew plants, perhaps even palm trees. Scientists have found palm pollen on the nearby coast, in sediments of the same age. Imagine palm trees in Antarctica, their leaves rustling in the southerly wind, their trunks reflected in the dark water of slow rivers. Somewhere in the forests surrounding these rivers lived creatures we will never see. Their remains, if they exist, are buried so deep beneath the ice that they cannot be reached. And then everything changed. 34 million years ago, at the boundary of two geological epochs, the Eocene and the Oligocene, the Earth began to change. The climate got colder. Scientists still argue about the causes of this cooling, but most agree on two main factors. The first is a change in the concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. The level of carbon dioxide in the air began to decline, and this caused the planet to retain less heat. The greenhouse effect weakened, and temperatures dropped. The second factor was the movement of the continents themselves. South America and Antarctica, which for millions of years had been connected by a narrow isthmus of land, finally separated. A strait opened up between them, the Drake Passage, which is now known as one of the most turbulent places on the planet. And when that strait opened, something important happened. A powerful ocean current formed around Antarctica. The Antarctic Circumpolar Current, as it's now called. This current became a barrier. It isolated the continent from warm water and air masses coming from the north. Antarctica was cut off from the rest of the world, surrounded by cold waters, blown by icy winds, and the process of glaciation began. At first, snow fell on mountain peaks and did not melt over the summer. Year after year, it accumulated, compacted, turned into ice. Glaciers began to descend the slopes, filling the valleys, covering the forests. Trees died under the weight of snow. Rivers froze. Life retreated to the coasts. And then, from there, the process took thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of years. But the outcome was inevitable. About 14 million years ago, after another global cooling, the East Antarctic ice sheet became stable and permanent. It hasn't changed much since then. The ice accumulated, grew thicker, heavier. Under its weight, the continent slowly sagged, and now much of Antarctica's bedrock is below sea level. The ice sheet turned the continent into a giant frozen desert, the coldest, windiest, driest place on the planet. And now, millions of years later, we stand on the edge of this icy world and try to look beneath its surface. The land beneath the Antarctic ice sheet is less well understood than the surface of Mars. Yes, that's right. We have sent many robots and probes to the red planet. We have made detailed maps of its canyons and plains. But what lies beneath our own feet, or rather beneath the feet of those who work at Antarctic stations, remains a mystery. Ice is a perfect defense. It is impenetrable to the ordinary eye, and even modern technology struggles to penetrate its thickness. But we're trying. We use radars that send radio waves deep into the ice and catch the reflected signals. We drill boreholes, trying to get to the bedrock. We measure magnetic and gravitational anomalies, trying to understand what lies beneath the white cover. And slowly, very slowly, a picture of the hidden world begins to emerge. A world of mountains and valleys, lakes and rivers that no one has seen for millions of years. In this hidden world, there are not only Gamburtsev mountains and ancient river valleys. There are lakes, huge subglacial lakes that exist in total darkness under many kilometers of ice. One of the most famous is Lake Vostok. It lies at a depth of about 4 kilometers beneath the surface of the ice, and its size is comparable to Baikal, about 250 kilometers long and about 50 wide. This lake has been cut off from the outside world for millions of years. The water in it did not see the sunlight, did not know the wind, did not know the change of seasons. And yet, as research has shown, there is life in this water. Microorganisms, bacteria, existing in complete isolation, adapted to life in eternal night and cold. And it's not the only such lake. Under the Antarctic ice sheet, scientists have discovered hundreds of subglacial water bodies of different sizes. And an even more surprising discovery was made under the Ross Ice Shelf. There, in an underground river, they found a living ecosystem. Hundreds of amphipods, small shrimp-like creatures that live in total darkness. How do they survive? What do they eat? These questions are still waiting to be answered. Deep in the caves, they found traces of DNA from algae, moss, and possibly small animals. Life, as it turns out, is incredibly tenacious. It finds a way to exist even where it seems impossible. These discoveries make us wonder, if life can exist in such extreme conditions here on Earth, perhaps it can exist in other cold, dark places in our solar system. Under the icy crust of the satellites of Jupiter and Saturn, in the subterranean oceans we suspect exist there, maybe there is life too. Antarctica becomes a kind of laboratory for us, where we learn to look for signs of life in the most unexpected places. But let's return to the question that may have already begun to form in your mind. If there is a whole world of ancient landscapes hidden under the ice of Antarctica, if there are mountains and valleys, rivers and lakes, then could there be traces of something more? Traces of civilization? This question has arisen in people's minds more than once. There are many stories, theories, legends that Antarctica may hide ruins of ancient cities, pyramids, artifacts of long-vanished cultures. These stories capture the imagination. They are appealing in their mystery, their promise to rewrite all of human history. But which of these are true, and which are just a play of the imagination? Let's try to make sense of it, treading carefully on the shaky line between scientific knowledge and romantic fantasy. Our story begins in the distant year 1513 in the Ottoman Empire. Imagine a port on the shores of the Mediterranean Sea. The hot air, soaked with the smell of salt and spices, the creaking of the ship's ropes, the cries of seagulls, the noise of the bazaar at the quayside. And somewhere in the shadows of the cool chambers, leaning over a table, a man is working. His name is Piri Reis. He is an admiral of the Ottoman fleet, an experienced navigator and cartographer. Dozens of maps are laid out before him: Portuguese, Arabic, maps of Christopher Columbus himself, obtained after sea battles. Piri Reis creates a new map of the world, compiling knowledge from all the sources available to him. He meticulously transcribes coastlines, islands, bays. His hand leads confidently across the parchment, leaving clear lines of ink. The map was amazing for its time. It shows parts of Europe, North Africa, the coast of Brazil, and the eastern tip of South America. Piri Reis made inscriptions in Turkish, indicating which sources he used. And then the map was preserved in the archives, where it lay for centuries, almost forgotten, until the year 1929, when it was accidentally discovered in the library of Topkapi Palace in Istanbul. When the map was shown to scientists, it aroused great interest. It was remarkably accurate for the early 16th century. But what really caught the attention of some scholars was the depiction of the coastline at the southern end of the map, where the known land of South America ended. The map showed the outline of some even more southern territory. And that's where the fun began. In the mid-20th century, a man named Charles Hapgood took up mapping. He was a professor of the history of science with a passion for geology and ancient maps. Hapgood came up with a bold hypothesis. What is shown in the southern part of the Piri Reis map is nothing but the coastline of Antarctica. But not the modern Antarctica, hidden under kilometers of ice, but the ancient Antarctica, as it was before the glaciation, with open shores and ice-free lands. Imagine the effect that statement had. If Hapgood is right, it means that someone mapped Antarctica thousands of years ago, even before the continent was covered with ice. But the ice sheet has been around for millions of years. So either some ancient, highly advanced civilization existed in the unimaginably distant past, or there's something wrong with the theory itself. Hapgood developed his idea further. He wrote a book that came out in 1966 called Maps of Ancient Sea Kings. In this book, he argued that Piri Reis had copied his map from more ancient sources, which in turn went back to maps created by an unknown, highly advanced seafaring civilization some 7,000 years before Christ. This civilization, according to Hapgood, had knowledge of spherical trigonometry and could create accurate maps based on astronomical observations. Hapgood also suggested that this ancient ice-free Antarctica existed because of the shift of the Earth's poles, a catastrophic event that may have occurred in the distant past. The theory sounded exciting. It promised a discovery that could overturn the entire history of mankind, an ancient civilization that was thousands of years ahead of its time, that had created accurate maps of the continents, that had disappeared as a result of a global catastrophe. It was a story worthy of the most daring fantasies, and many people believed it. Hapgood's book became popular, gave rise to a whole wave of alternative theories and hypotheses. But science is not just romantic stories and bold assumptions. Science is also about careful fact-checking, meticulous analysis, and a willingness to admit error when the evidence points the other way. And when scientists began to scrutinize the Piri Reis map and Hapgood's theory, many problems emerged. Firstly, to see an image of Antarctica in the Piri Reis map, one had to try very hard. Hapgood used a method of radical redrawing. He changed the scale of different parts of the map, rotated them, stretched until the contours began to resemble the outlines of the Antarctic continent. But if you take the original map without these manipulations, the similarity disappears. The southern coastline on the map looks more like a continuation of the coast of South America, just extended to the east. In the early 16th century, Europeans were just beginning to explore the southern part of the American continent, and many cartographers were speculating about what the land might look like further south. Second, on the Piri Reis map, this supposed Antarctica is connected to South America. There is no Drake Passage, which separates the two continents. And yet this strait has existed for millions of years, ever since South America and Antarctica split apart. If ancient cartographers actually visited these places, they would have known about the strait. Third, and perhaps most important, are the inscriptions on the map itself. Piri Reis left notes describing the southern lands. And these notes say that it's warm, that the climate is mild. But if it really is Antarctica, even without an ice sheet, it's still in the high latitudes where it's cold. The description of a warm climate does not match the geographical reality. Finally, the most important contradiction is temporal. The Antarctic ice sheet has existed for millions of years, or 34 million years ago. Glaciation began, and the continent has not been free of ice since then. Human civilization, even in the most optimistic estimates, has only existed for a few millennia. Our oldest cities date back some 10 to 12,000 years. How could humans have mapped Antarctica without ice if the last time it was so was long before the first humans appeared on Earth? Most serious scientists today reject Hapgood's hypothesis. Piri Reis's map is indeed a remarkable cartographic monument of its time, but what is depicted in its southern part is probably just an inaccurate representation of the coast of South America, based on the incomplete and distorted data available in the early 16th century. But the story of Antarctica and ancient civilizations did not end there. If the Piri Reis map does not prove the existence of ancient settlements under the ice, maybe there is other evidence. Maybe Antarctica itself is the legendary Atlantis, about which the ancient Greek philosopher Plato wrote. This idea was put forward in 1995 by Canadian writers Rose and Rand Flemat. They drew attention to Plato's description of Atlantis. Plato wrote that it was a huge island continent, the size of Libya and Asia combined. It lay beyond the Pillars of Hercules, which was the ancient name for the Strait of Gibraltar, the entrance to the Mediterranean Sea from the Atlantic Ocean. Atlantis had been a mighty civilization, but then sank into the abyss of the sea in one terrible night of earthquakes and floods. Flem Ati reasoned, Antarctica is a land mass near the South Pole. It's really huge. It lies far beyond the Pillars of Hercules if you sail from the Mediterranean Sea. And it's submerged, not in the sea, though, but under the ice. Maybe the ancient Greeks somehow preserved vague memories of a continent at the edge of the world that was swallowed not by water, but by ice? The theory looked intriguing, but even here, a closer look revealed serious problems. Plato very clearly indicated that Atlantis was located in the Atlantic Ocean. The very name Atlantis comes from the name of the Titan Atlas, who, according to Greek mythology, held the firmament to the west, in the area of modern Morocco or West Africa. Atlantis was the land of the setting sun, the western edge of the known world. Antarctica, on the other hand, is in the south, and the ancient Greeks, as far as we know, had no knowledge of it. In addition, Plato described Atlantis as a warm, fertile land with rich vegetation, many animals, and developed agriculture. Antarctica, even if we imagine that the Greeks somehow knew of its existence, was never a warm place in historical times. Yes, millions of years ago, there were forests and rivers there, but that was long before the appearance of man, long before ancient Greece, long before any human civilization. And yet, despite all scientific refutations, myths about lost cities and ancient civilizations in Antarctica continue to live on. On the internet, you can find many articles about mysterious pyramids found on satellite images among the Antarctic ice. These photos look impressive. Sharp, symmetrical peaks sticking out of the snow really do resemble pyramids. But geologists explain these are natural rock formations called pyramidal peaks, or simply pointed peaks. They are formed when glaciers advance on one mountain, massive from several sides, shrinking its slopes and creating a characteristic pyramidal shape. Such formations are found in many mountain systems of the world, not only in Antarctica. Irving Geology. Professor Eric Rigno, one of the leading experts on glaciers, explained the phenomenon. When glaciers move, they work like giant planers, chiseling away rocks. If several glaciers converge to one point from different directions, they leave a sharp peak in the center, a natural pyramid of rock. The Ellsworth Mountains in Antarctica, where these famous photos were taken, demonstrate just such a process. These are not the creations of ancient builders, but the work of eternal sculptors, ice and time. There is another category of myths related to Antarctica. These are stories about secret Nazi expeditions during the Third Reich, about the search for entrances to the underworld, about secret bases and attempts to find traces of ancient civilizations. These stories are actively exploited in mass culture. in films, books, video games. They create an atmosphere of mystery and conspiracy. But historians who have carefully studied the archives of that period have not found any documentary evidence of such expeditions. Yes, German explorers did visit Antarctica in the 30s of the 20th century, mapped some areas, but there were no grand archaeological searches or attempts to find lost cities. These are beautiful legends, nothing more. Why are these myths so persistent? Why do people continue to believe in the sunken, or rather frozen, cities of Antarctica, despite all the refutations of science? I think the reason is that Antarctica remains a mystery to us. It is the last great undiscovered continent on our planet. We live in a world that seems completely explored. Every piece of land is mapped. Satellites photograph every square meter of the surface. Tourists reach the most remote corners. It seems that there are no white spots left, no room for great discoveries. But Antarctica is an exception. Under its ice lies a whole world to which we have almost no access. And this inaccessibility gives rise to fantasies. We want to believe that there could be something incredible underneath the kilometers of ice. Ruins of cities, artifacts of vanished cultures, answers to questions that have long plagued mankind. We want to believe that the history of our civilization may be much older and more amazing than textbooks tell us. And Antarctica, with its impenetrable ice cover, becomes the ideal screen for projecting these desires. But you know, the truth is often just as amazing as the wildest fantasies. We don't need fictional sunken cities to marvel at Antarctica. What we actually find there is already amazing enough. Beneath the ice sheet lies an ancient river landscape the size of a country, preserved in minute detail for 14 million years. Imagine, 14 million years. As the planet's surface changed ages, as species died and new species appeared, as continents slowly drifted across the surface of the mantle, this landscape lay unchanged, preserved by the cold. Every valley, every ancient riverbed was preserved, as if the water had flowed there yesterday. There is life in subglacial lakes that has evolved for millions of years in complete isolation from the rest of the world. Microorganisms that may represent completely unique life forms found nowhere else on the planet. Ecosystems that exist without sunlight, in perpetual cold and darkness. Isn't that a miracle? The Gambortsev Mountains are one of the best preserved ancient mountain ranges on the planet. They're 700 million years old. They have seen Gondwana form and break up. They have witnessed the emergence of complex life forms in the oceans. They remember a time when there were no land plants, no insects, no vertebrates on land. and they still stand, hidden but not destroyed. Autonomous submersibles roam beneath ice shelves, exploring the murky waters and studying how warm ocean currents break up the ice from below. One such vehicle, called Ron, has been exploring Dotson Glacier and Tuwaites Glacier, the same doomsday glacier whose melting could lead to significant sea level rise. Ran mapped the lower part of the glaciers, measured water temperatures, currents. And then, at the beginning of the year 2024, during a mission to Tuwaites Glacier, Ron mysteriously disappeared. Communications were cut off. The signal was lost. The machine was never found. What happened to it in the dark depths beneath the glacier? Did it encounter an unforeseen obstacle? Did its machinery malfunction? Or did something else happen? We don't know. And it's a reminder that Antarctica is still full of danger and mystery. Even for our most advanced technology, scientists continue their work. They are using ever more precise methods to look beneath the ice sheet. Radar surveys are getting more detailed. Drilling rigs are penetrating ever deeper. Satellites measure tiny changes in the continent's gravitational and magnetic fields, helping to reconstruct its hidden structure. Slowly, step by step, we're mapping Antarctica under the ice. And with each new discovery, this hidden world becomes a little less mysterious, but no less surprising. To truly understand Antarctica and its hidden secrets, we need to go even further back in time. We need to imagine the Earth not as a fixed, frozen ball, but as a living, breathing system, where the continents slide across the surface like ice flows on a spring river. Very slowly, almost imperceptibly, but inexorably. The Earth's crust is divided into huge plates that float on the viscous mantle, a layer of hot rock that is under such temperature and pressure that it behaves almost like a very thick liquid. These plates are moving. They collide, they separate, they crawl over each other. They move at a tiny rate, a few centimeters a year, about the same rate your fingernails grow. But over millions of years, those centimeters add up to thousands of kilometers. Continents that were once neighbors end up on opposite sides of the planet. Oceans open up between lands that used to be one. 700 million years ago, there was a supercontinent called Gondwana, a vast landmass stretching from one side of the planet to the other. If you could stand on the shores of an ancient ocean in those days, you would see before you vast plains, mountain ranges stretching out over the horizon, rivers carrying their waters across the continent. The lands we now know as Africa, South America, Australia, India, and of course, Antarctica, were fused together in this supercontinent. They were parts of one whole, separated by valleys and mountains, but not by oceans. But Gondwana could not last forever. Forces deep beneath the Earth's crust were slowly tearing it apart. Magma rose from the depths, creating cracks. The cracks widened, becoming faults. The rifts filled with water, became seas, and then oceans. The continents began their long journey around the world. Africa traveled north, South America west, Australia and India east. Antarctica slowly slid towards the South Pole, where it would meet the cold and ice. At the base of each continent are ancient, stable structures that geologists call cratons. These are the oldest, most durable parts of the Earth's crust. They were formed billions of years ago, when the planet was young and hot, when the first parts of the solid crust were cooling among oceans of molten rock. Cratons are the roots of continents, their foundations. They survive plate collisions, mountain building, erosion. They are stable, like anchors holding the continents in place in the turbulent chaos of tectonic activity. But even cratons don't last forever. Sometimes they undergo a process called decratonization, when a strong ancient rock thins, weakens, and loses its stability. Scientists are studying this process using the example of the North China Craton, which is now undergoing such a transformation. What causes decratonization? Maybe the impact of the hot mantle from below. Maybe the collision with other plates. Maybe a complex combination of factors that we do not yet fully understand. But the fact remains that even the oldest and most stable parts of our planet are subject to change. And also in the oceans, between the continents, lie the remains of other ancient lands, microcontinents that were once part of large land masses, but then broke away, sank under the water, became hidden areas of crust on the ocean floor. In 2017, scientists announced the existence of a new continent, Zealandia. Most of it is hidden under the waters of the Pacific Ocean. Only New Zealand and a few small islands stick out above the surface. But it is indeed a continent, with its own continental crust and geological history. In Europe, under the mountains of the Alps and Apennines, the remains of an ancient microcontinent have been discovered, called the Great Adria. It was once a landmass about the size of Greenland, but it was swallowed up, fragmented, and buried beneath tectonic plates creeping up from the north. In the Indian Ocean, traces have been found of the continent of Kerguelen, a vast stretch of land that existed millions of years ago and then sank into the ocean depths. Our planet is full of such lost lands, ghost continents whose existence we are only beginning to realize. How do scientists know the age of these ancient structures? How can we determine that the Gamburtsev Mountains are 700 million years old, and that the roots of the Scandinavian mountains also date back to that distant time? The answer lies in small crystals called zircons. Scientists call them time capsules. And this is a very accurate definition. Zircon is a mineral that forms in igneous rocks as they cool. When molten magma cools and crystallizes, the atoms arrange themselves into ordered structures, creating various minerals. Zircon is one of them. But zircon has a special property. When it crystallizes, uranium atoms are embedded in its crystal lattice. Uranium is a radioactive element. It decays slowly but steadily into lead, and the rate of this decay is well known. It's constant, independent of temperature, pressure, or other external conditions. It's a perfect clock, counting down from the moment the crystal is formed. When geologists find a zircon crystal in a rock, they measure the ratio of uranium to lead in it. If there is a lot of uranium and little lead, the crystal is young. It was formed recently by geological standards. If there is as much or more lead than uranium, the crystal is ancient, millions or even billions of years old. In this way, you can determine the age of rocks with amazing accuracy. You can find out when the magma that created the rock cooled. You can trace the history of a continent back hundreds of millions of years. This is how scientists learnt that the Gamburtsev Mountains beneath the Antarctic ice were formed during the birth of Gondwana, that they had survived the continent's journey from the equator to the pole, that they had seen the birth and disappearance of countless forms of life, the changing of climates, the advance and retreat of glaciers. And all this time they stood, slowly eroded by erosion, but not extinct, protected over the last million years by an ice sheet that became their shroud and guardian at the same time. But let's take our minds off Antarctica for a while and look around at the other mysteries of our planet. Because the Earth is full of hidden worlds, lost landscapes, and unexpected discoveries. And some of them help us better understand what might be lurking beneath the ice of the southern continent. In the center of North America, among the plains and forests, are the Great Lakes, vast freshwater seas left by ancient glaciers. One of them, Lake Michigan, holds a strange mystery at its bottom. At a depth of more than 100 meters, in the cold, dark waters, scientists have discovered dozens of huge, round craters. Their diameter ranges from 90 to 180 meters. They lie on the bottom of the lake in regular circles, as if someone or something had purposefully burned these perfectly round holes in the ground. What's that? Meteorite impact marks? Karst sinkholes formed by the dissolution of underground rocks? Traces of ancient glaciers that plowed out the bottom of the future lake? So far, scientists cannot give a definitive answer. Each hypothesis has its strengths and its weaknesses. The research continues. Underwater robots descend into the depths of the craters, study their structure, take samples of bottom sediments. In these low oxygen environments, in the depths of the craters, where there is almost no light and little oxygen, they have discovered amazing ecosystems, microorganisms, and more complex creatures that have adapted to life in such extreme conditions. By studying them, we can better understand how life flourished in Earth's ancient oceans when the atmosphere contained far less oxygen than it does today. Also, at the bottom of Lake Michigan, in Traverse Bay, archaeologists have discovered something remarkable. A prehistoric stone structure similar to Stonehenge, a circle of huge boulders arranged in a particular way. It's estimated to be around 9,000 years old. This means that the structure was created shortly after the end of the last ice age, when the lake level was much lower and the site was on land or in shallow water. One of the boulders is engraved with the image of a mastodon, a huge elephant-like creature that roamed these lands in those distant times when the climate was colder and the landscapes resembled tundra. Who created this structure? Ancient hunters who followed herds of mastodons? What role did it play in their lives? Was it a place for rituals, astronomical observations, or just a marker on the migration route? Lake Michigan's underwater Stonehenge holds its secrets. But it reminds us that even seemingly well-studied parts of our planet can hold surprises. That beneath the water, beneath the silt, beneath the earth, there may be traces of the past we never knew we had. This finding begs the question: if ancient people left their footprints at the bottom of the Great Lakes, if those footprints were hidden by water for thousands of years and have only recently been discovered thanks to modern technology, what could be hiding in other, even less accessible places? At the bottom of the oceans? Under layers of sedimentary rock? Or under kilometers of Antarctic ice? But it is not only the depths of lakes and oceans that hold mysteries. Threats come to our planet from above, from outer space. The sky, which seems so peaceful and distant, is in fact full of objects traveling at great speeds. Asteroids, comets, fragments of space rocks wander through space, and sometimes their paths intersect with the Earth's orbit. 66 million years ago, an asteroid struck the Yucatan Peninsula in what is now Mexico. It was huge, 10 to 14 kilometers across. As it entered the atmosphere, friction heated it to the temperature at which metal glows. It shot across the sky in a blinding flash of light, leaving a trail of fire behind it. And then it struck. The energy of the impact was unimaginable. It was equivalent to the detonation of billions of atomic bombs. The asteroid pierced the Earth's crust, creating a crater nearly 200 kilometers in diameter. Molten rock exploded into the sky. The shock wave traveled across the planet. The tsunamis raised by the impact hit the coasts of the continents, washing away everything in their path. But that was just the beginning. Trillions of tons of dust, ash, vaporized rock rose into the atmosphere. The sky darkened. Sunlight could not penetrate this veil. There was a long night that lasted months, maybe years. Temperatures plummeted. The plants, deprived of light, could not photosynthesize and began to die. And with them went the herbivores that ate the plants and the predators that preyed on the herbivores. Food chains collapsed, one by one. It was a mass extinction that wiped out the dinosaurs, creatures that had ruled the planet for more than 160 million years. The crater from this impact is called the Chicxulub crater. It is partly hidden underwater and partly buried under layers of sediment, but its traces are still visible today. Scientists are studying it, trying to understand the details of the disaster. And recently, another discovery was made. It turns out that Chicxulub was not the only impact at that time. Almost simultaneously, with the accuracy of a few thousand years, and by geological standards it is an instant, another asteroid fell off the coast of West Africa. This second asteroid was smaller. Its diameter is estimated at 450 to 500 meters. But it, too, took a terrible blow. It crashed into the ocean, creating a crater called the Nadir crater. The impact caused a tsunami over 790 meters high. Imagine a wave almost a kilometer high, traveling across the ocean at the speed of a jet plane. It crashed onto the coasts, washing everything hundreds of kilometers inland. There is a theory that asteroid Nadir could have been a debris from Chicxulub, that the huge asteroid split before entering the atmosphere, with one large fragment falling in Mexico and a smaller one off Africa. Two impacts, a double disaster, sealing the end of the dinosaur age. But space threats are not just a distant past. They're still real today. In 1988, an object, a comet or asteroid, with a diameter of 45 to 90 meters, exploded in the sky over the remote Tunguska region of Siberia. It did not reach the surface of the Earth. It exploded in the air at a height of several kilometers. But the power of the explosion was enough to fell 80 million trees over an area of 2,000 square kilometers. The shock wave traveled around the globe. Witnesses hundreds of kilometers away from the blast site saw a blinding flash of light and felt the heat of a red-hot furnace. If such an explosion had occurred over a major city, the consequences would have been catastrophic. In the year 2013, a small asteroid, only about 18 meters in diameter, entered the atmosphere above Chelyabinsk in Russia. It too exploded in mid-air at an altitude of about 30 kilometers. The shock wave shattered windows in 7,200 buildings. More than 1,000 people were injured, mostly from shards of glass. It was an ordinary winter day. People were going to work, children to school. And suddenly, the sky lit up brighter than the sun. And then came a wave that made the buildings shake. No one had expected it. The asteroid came from the direction of the sun, and telescopes could not see it in advance. NASA and other space agencies are constantly monitoring the sky for potentially dangerous objects. One of the most closely watched is the asteroid Bennu. It's a fairly large object, about 500 meters in diameter. Scientists have calculated that there is a small, but not zero, probability of its collision with the Earth between 2178 and 2200 and 290 years. The probability is small, about 1 chance in 2,700, but the consequences of such a collision would be serious. An asteroid the size of Bennu falling into the ocean would cause catastrophic tsunamis. If it hit land, it would create a crater several kilometers across and release so much dust into the atmosphere that it could affect the planet's climate for several years. Space is not the only source of catastrophes for our planet. Threats lurk in the Earth itself, in its heated depths. In 2022 year, there was an event that made scientists all over the world hold their breath. In the South Pacific Ocean, not far from the island kingdom of Tonga, an underwater volcano with a long, hard-to-pronounce name, Hunga Tonga Hunga Hapai, exploded. The eruption was colossal. It was equivalent in power to the 5 largest nuclear tests ever conducted by mankind. The column of ash and steam soared to a height of more than 50 kilometers, breaking through the troposphere and stratosphere, reaching the mesosphere, the uppermost layers of the atmosphere. The shock wave from the explosion traveled across the planet twice, circling the Earth in both directions. The tsunami generated by the explosion reached the coasts of Japan, North and South America, even the Mediterranean Sea. People on the islands of Tonga, just a few dozen kilometers from the volcano, experienced a real apocalypse. The sky turned black with ash, waves washed away houses, and the rumble of the explosion could be heard thousands of kilometers away. But the most striking thing is what happened to the water. The volcano ejected huge amounts of water vapor into the stratosphere. Between 100 and 150 million tons of water ended up more than 15 kilometers above the planet's surface. That's the equivalent of 60,000 Olympic swimming pools. Water vapor is a greenhouse gas, and its presence in the stratosphere creates long-term uncertainties for weather patterns and climate. Scientists are still trying to understand how it will affect our planet in the coming years. Volcanoes, asteroids, continental movement, glaciation, all these forces shape the shape of our planet. And in the midst of all these grandiose processes, people sometimes create myths and legends, trying to explain what they see or invent worlds that never existed. One of the most persistent of these legends is the hollow Earth theory. Imagine the idea that our planet is not a solid ball, but a hollow sphere, that there are vast spaces inside the Earth, perhaps inhabited, lit by an inner sun, that there are huge holes at the poles through which we can enter this hidden world. Sounds like the plot of a fantasy novel, doesn't it? And indeed, many writers have used this idea in their works. But some people took this theory seriously. One of the first people who tried to scientifically substantiate the idea of a hollow Earth was the famous English astronomer Edmund Halley. Yes, the same Halley whose name the famous comet bears. In 1692nd year, he suggested that the Earth may consist of several concentric shells nested in each other like matryoshka dolls, with voids between them. This idea was an attempt to explain the anomalies in the Earth's magnetic field observed by mariners of the time. Later, in 1818, the American John Cleves Sims, Jr. developed a more detailed version of the theory. He argued that the Earth had a hollow shell about 1,300 kilometers thick, and that at the north and south poles there were huge holes about 2,300 kilometers in diameter. Through these openings, he believed, it was possible to get inside the planet. Sims even tried to organize an expedition to the North Pole to find this hole, but was not funded. The hollow Earth theory has captured the imagination of many people. It appeared in novels, stories, and conspiracy theories. Some claimed that entire civilizations lived inside the Earth. Others believed that the remains of ancient peoples, such as the Atlanteans or the Lemurians, lurked there. Antarctica, as the least explored continent, naturally became the center of many such stories. It was said that beneath its ice were hidden entrances to the underworld, but science does not tolerate romantic fantasies if they contradict the facts. And the facts are very clear. The Earth is not hollow. We have plenty of evidence for this, and it is absolutely irrefutable. Firstly, seismology. When an earthquake occurs, it sends waves across the planet. These waves come in different types: longitudinal, transverse, surface. They propagate at different speeds depending on the density and condition of the material they're traveling through. Scientists have set up seismographs all over the world, and they record these waves. By analyzing how the waves travel through the Earth, how they refract, reflect, accelerate, or decelerate, it's possible to create a detailed picture of the planet's internal structure. And that picture shows the Earth has a dense iron-nickel core surrounded by a viscous mantle covered by a relatively thin crust. There are no huge voids. If the Earth were hollow, seismic waves would behave very differently. Secondly, density and gravity. The average density of the Earth is 5,520 kilograms per cubic meter. This is much higher than the density of the Earth's crustal rocks, which is usually around 2,800 kilograms per cubic meter. This high average density is only possible if there are very dense materials inside the planet, such as iron and nickel in the core. If all of the Earth's mass was concentrated in a thin crust, and there was a void inside, the density of the crust material would have to be more than 30,000 kilograms per cubic meter. No known rock has such a density. Third, the strength of the materials. The rocks that make up the Earth's crust are simply not strong enough to hold a hollow vault of planetary proportions. Under gravity, such a structure would collapse immediately. The maximum depth of natural caves on Earth is about 3,000 meters, and that is only possible in special geological conditions. A cavity the size of a planet is physically impossible. Fourth, the idea of an inner sun. Some versions of the hollow Earth theory suggest that there is a small sun inside the planet, illuminating the inner world. But for the birth of a star, even the smallest, you need a mass 10 times greater than the mass of Jupiter, the largest planet in our solar system. That's hundreds of times the mass of the entire Earth. In addition, such a star inside a planet would create enormous heat radiation that would exceed that of the sun. The surface of the Earth would be heated to temperatures incompatible with life, and the gravity of such an object would tear the planet apart. And finally, the simplest proof. Numerous expeditions to the poles have not found any huge holes. People stood at the North Pole, at the South Pole, flew over them on aeroplanes, photographed from space. There are no holes. There is only ice, snow, and rocks. The hollow Earth theory is a beautiful fantasy, but nothing more. Reality is arranged differently, though no less amazing. Our planet is full of other oddities that don't require pseudoscientific explanations to be interesting. For example, did you know that there have been ghost islands in the oceans? Places that have appeared on maps for almost 2 centuries, but never actually existed. One of the most famous of these ghosts is Sandy Island. This island has been mapped in the South Pacific. It appeared in atlases, in navigational charts, even in scientific papers. Sailors told stories about it, although, as it later turned out, no one knew for sure who had actually seen it. In 2012, a group of Australian scientists set out to verify the existence of Sandy Island. They sailed to the given coordinates and found the open ocean. It was over 1,200 meters deep. There was no island, and there never had been. Sandy Island was off the map. The ghost was gone. So where did it come from on the maps? Most likely, it was a mistake made by an early navigator, which was copied from map to map, from atlas to atlas. Maybe someone mistook a cloud for land, or miscalculated their position, or simply made up an island to fill an empty spot on the map. And then that mistake lived its life for almost 200 years, until modern technology allowed it to be discovered. Speaking of maps, did you know that the line separating the calendar days on our planet zigzags? The international date line was established in the year 1884 at the same conference where the prime meridian in Greenwich was determined. It would be logical to draw this line along the 180th meridian, strictly in a circle, but the line loops, goes round islands, makes bizarre turns. Why? Because nobody wants one country, one island, to be split in half and have one day on one half and the next day on the other half. It would create unimaginable confusion. That's why the line bypasses populated areas. For example, the island nation of Kiribati in the year 1994 asked that the line be moved so that all their islands would be on the same calendar day. And the line was shifted, creating a huge bulge in the ocean. This line, like time zones, is a completely artificial concept. It is invisible. It exists only in our agreements and on our maps. But it is real in the sense that it affects our lives. Crossing it from west to east, you lose a day. Today's Tuesday instantly becomes yesterday's Monday. Crossing it from east to west, you gain an extra day. It's a reminder that many things we think of as absolute and immutable are actually human inventions, convenient arrangements created to order the chaos of reality, but back to the real, tangible mysteries of the past, to the fossils that tell us stories of worlds that disappeared millions of years ago. In Egypt, in the Western Desert, there's an amazing place called Wadi al-Khitan, Whale Valley. It is now a dry, lifeless desert where temperatures can exceed 50 degrees during the day. Sand and rocks stretch to the horizon. But in this desert, among the sand dunes and weathered rocks, lie bones, huge bones, whale skeletons. Millions of years ago, this place wasn't a desert. Here was the ancient Tethys Sea, warm, shallow, full of life. And in that sea, whales swam. Not like the whales of today. These ancient whales were different. They had hind legs, small, underdeveloped, useless for traveling on land, but still present as a reminder that the whale's ancestors had once been land animals. These whales were a transitional form, a living record of evolution, imprinted in bone and flesh. When these whales died, their bodies sank to the bottom of the sea. Silt and sand covered the bones, protecting them from destruction. The sea receded, the climate changed, and the place became a desert. But the bones remained, slowly protruding from the sand, exposed by the wind. Now the Whale Valley is the world's largest ancient cemetery of whales, a place of pilgrimage for paleontologists, an open-air museum where you can touch the history of life on Earth. And in the same Sahara, in rocks about 1 billion years old, scientists have found something quite unusual: bright pink pigments. This is ancient chlorophyll, preserved from photosynthetic organisms that lived in the oceans more than 1 billion years ago. The pink color suggests that these were very simple organisms, possibly bacteria or single-celled algae. The finding helps us understand why larger, more complex creatures appeared much later in Earth's history. The food chain of the ancient oceans simply lacked components. There were not enough large organisms producing organics to feed more complex life forms. And so we are back to Antarctica again, because this icy continent not only keeps the secrets of its past, but also brings us gifts from outer space. Antarctica is a gold mine for meteorite hunters. On its snow-white surface, dark space rocks can be seen like the palm of your hand. About 50,000 meteorites have been found there in recent decades. Each meteorite is a messenger from the depths of space, a piece of another world that has fallen to Earth. In the year 1984, a very special meteorite was found in a place called the Allen Hills. It was labeled ALH8401. It was a rather unassuming gray stone, weighing less than 2 kilograms, But analysis revealed something remarkable. It had come from Mars. About 4 billion years ago, this rock fragment formed on the red planet when Mars was a young, possibly warm and wet world. Then, about 17 million years ago, a massive meteor strike on the surface of Mars threw a lot of debris into space. One of these debris traveled through space for millions of years until 13,000 years ago, when its orbit crossed the Earth. It entered the atmosphere, heated up, fell into Antarctica, and lay there in ice for 13,000 years until people found it. But the best part came next. In 1996, a team of scientists announced that inside meteorite ALH84-1, they had found traces that might indicate the existence of life on Mars. The tiny particles of magnetite, an iron mineral, had a structure very similar to those produced by magnetotactic bacteria on Earth, microorganisms that use magnetic crystals to orient themselves in space. It was an explosion. Life on Mars? Even if it is ancient, extinct, existed billions of years ago, but still, life. The discovery sparked heated debate in the scientific community. Some scientists supported the hypothesis. Others pointed out that such structures can be formed by non-biological processes. The debate continues to this day. There's no definitive answer, but the very fact that we can hold a piece of Mars in our hands and look for traces of life in it, isn't that amazing? And Antarctica continues to give us meteorites. But unfortunately, climate change is threatening this treasure trove. Even in sub-zero temperatures, when the air remains cold, the dark meteorites absorb the sun's heat more than the surrounding white snow. They heat up, melt the ice beneath them, and slowly sink into it, becoming invisible. Scientists estimate that Antarctica loses about 5,000 meteorites each year, which sink into the ice and disappear from our reach. Maybe there are more rocks from Mars, or the Moon, or asteroids among them, storing unique information about the early solar system. But we'll never find them. Here comes the end of our journey. We started with the question of sunken cities under Antarctica, with romantic legends of ancient civilizations and mysterious maps. And what did we find? We didn't find cities, but we did find something perhaps even more surprising. We found an entire hidden continent, frozen in time. Ancient mountains, 700 million years old. River valleys, where palm trees once grew, and now there's eternal ice. Lakes isolated from the world for millions of years, where life continues to exist in total darkness. Ecosystems beneath glaciers that we are only beginning to understand. We have learnt that our planet is constantly changing, that continents drift, that climates fluctuate, that life finds a way to exist even in the most incredible conditions. We have seen that threats come from outer space and from deep within the earth. But our planet is remarkably resilient. It has survived countless catastrophes and continues to exist, full of life and beauty. And we realized that we don't need fictitious cities and mythical civilizations to see the miracle. The miracle is in what exists, in what is real. In the ancient landscape, preserved for 14 million years. In the tiny zircon crystals that hold the memory of the birth of the mountains. In a meteorite from Mars that may carry traces of extraterrestrial life. Whales with legs whose bones lie in the desert where the sea once splashed. Antarctica remains a mystery, but it is a mystery that we are slowly unraveling. With each year, with each expedition, with each new discovery, we get to know it better. And who knows what other mysteries it will reveal to us in the future. And now, my dear listeners, it is time for us to say goodbye. May this night be peaceful. May your dreams be filled with amazing worlds, ancient forests on the edge of the southern continent, the slow dance of glaciers, starry skies over endless snowy expanses. Thank you for being with me on this journey through time and space. Good night. And until the next time when we go again to explore the mysteries of our amazing planet.